everybody, welcome back to Record-ology. This is going to be awesome. So, today we take another look at the Sony automatic turntable. This is the third iteration, the newest version that we have reviewed. So far, my impressions of Sony turntables have been that they're adequate, but they're just not that exciting. Well, hopefully that'll change with today's model. It's a little bit different. They've gone through a redesign. Let's see what they've done. Let's see how it compares to similar turntables at that price point. Anyway, my friends, you're not going to want to miss this. So here we have the latest and greatest Sony automatic turntable. I picked this up on Prime Day a few weeks back, and I got like 50 bucks off. It was a killer deal. Now, and on a regular day, this goes for, I think, $248. It's within $1 of the new Audio-Technica LP70X Bluetooth version. My impression on Sony turntables may surprise you, actually. As a child of the 80s and 90s, anything with the word Sony on it usually meant top quality, at least for non-audiophiles. Like, it was a normal person's high-quality device. You could be assured that it wasn't junk. But, like so many things that have changed since then, that's not necessarily the case anymore. Unfortunately, Sony, as far as the brand, makes some amazing things still. But this product is sort of a commodity now. And the brand Sony, in this case, is just a brand on a product that's imported like so many other products are these days. Not necessarily a bad thing, but a totally different market. So in this case, Sony doesn't build this. They may spec out the design, and that's good, but they're working with a manufacturing partner. So things are a bit different than they used to be. Also, the previous Sony automatics that we've reviewed, very similar looking to this. It will have the same internals as we've seen in a lot of automatics these days, which is fine. Not a problem there whatsoever, but it's something worth pointing out. And overall, with those Sony automatic turntables, even being a fan of Sony, Discmans, Walkmans, radios, everything they used to do, now I feel like it's okay. It's just not, I don't know how else to say it. It's just not as awesome and exciting as you would think a Sony product would be. I was just sort of okay with it. I wasn't super impressed with their previous automatic turntables. And these date back to, within the last 10 years. They're a bit light, cheap, and plasticky. So interesting. That's weird. I thought it was like a felt, but it's like I don't even know what this is. I don't know if you can see the texture. It's not felt. It's interesting. It's like a layered foam. It's like it's more like a spandex platter mat. That's interesting. Okay, about a 2 mil thickness. That would be a good service. I've never seen one made out of this stuff before. Huh. Okay. Learn something new every day. All right, lifted the turntable out of the box. Sometimes it's worth filming that. Sometimes it's just cumbersome. Such was the case today. And let's see here. We got our user manual. This is a thick user manual. Sealed in this bag. Airtight sanitary user manual. So we've got our warranty card and the manual. I'm sure it's repeated in at least 2 languages. So there's that. The dust cover will be in this top layer. This is a lot of packaging is done this way now, where it's all sort of an in-one package type of unit. So we got the styrofoam that holds everything from the dust cover, the turntable in the middle, and then the platter is actually sandwiched on the bottom there. I shouldn't say sandwiched. It's on the bottom. What's sandwiched is the turntable itself. So this thing is very well taped in, tightly packed. And let's take a look at that dust cover. Ooh, it's a smoked dust cover. You guys know I love a smoked dust cover. All right. Yeah, it's a low profile one too. That's nice and low. And we got the receptacles for the clips. No branding on the top. Nice thick construction. Rubber stops on the edges. So that looks great. Next we have the box that probably has, oh, the power supply. I thought it was going to be the hinges, but this is the power supply. Next thing we need to do is look for accessories in the end caps here. Something to be very careful about because oftentimes people will throw this stuff away and they'll miss out on their accessories. And this one, I can tell that it's just on one side, nothing on the other side. So let me go ahead and get those out of there. Okay, in there was the 2 hinges for the lid, and we've got a 45 adapter. Not the bottom of the barrel, but definitely not as good as a custom Record-ology 3D printed one. Those are always good. Get yours now. Another thing I wanted to bring up too, in my last video, the LP70, which is a fun turntable. I'm still enjoying mine quite a bit. Been listening a lot to it. But one thing that I forgot to mention on the original video, and it's something that a couple people have brought up in the comments, is that the play and pause or the play and stop buttons, that those buttons are located under the lid. So you have to open the lid to start and stop the record player, which may not sound like a big deal, but if you remember, the LP60 had it on the outside. So the lid could be down and you could start and stop your record. And it is a bit annoying because you have to lift the dust cover every single time. So it's not quite one-hand operation. I mean, we're really, you know, it's still a fantastic turntable. We're getting really nitpicky. The other thing is, and this is a good thing, is I found out that it has a mute when you first hit play, so it's muted. It actually unmutes by the time the needle drops, so it's not a muted drop, but at the same time, it is actually muted in the rest. So if you try to clean the stylus while it's laying in the rest, you won't hear anything until that needle hits the record itself. And there's about a 1 second delay. And that's actually kind of a cool feature. So I got to thinking, does that mean that the whole thing is buffered somehow? Is there some sort of logic involved? But that's not the case because I tested it by raising and lowering the stylus, and the sound starts and stops immediately. But when it's in the rest, it's muted. Speaking of this one, here it is. It's a bigger turntable. Let's go ahead and get this platter out from underneath here finally. This will be using a die-cast aluminum platter, which will be the same variety that we've seen in so many of these units. But it's a good platter. It's a really, really good platter. It's got some weight to it because it is metal, albeit aluminum. It is a belt-driven turntable, so our belt rests on the sub-platter here with a handy-dandy ribbon to help us align it. Man, this is a beautiful turntable. Look at this thing. I love it. Considerably larger than the LP70. Sorry I keep talking about that one, but it's fresh in my mind. We just reviewed it. The internals, I do want to talk about it. So very, very similar. Everything from like here over is going to be the same. This area here. But remember the motor on the LP70 was down here. In fact, you can sort of see where it possibly could have been positioned. But over here is where it is on this unit, which is ideal. You always want your motor as far away diametrically opposed to the stylus as possible. So that is a win for the Sony, and that's a good design. Overall, I'm loving this thing. Also, look at this down here. Isn't this interesting? I have never, ever seen this before. There is a micro USB jack down there. Isn't that the weirdest thing? Is that a service port? Like I don't know what you would do. There's got to be some form of logic on here. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't need that. That's a very strange thing. When I was first looking around the corner, I thought that might be a sensor, like an optical sensor for speed accuracy, which would have been awesome. But that's an actual USB jack. Very strange. The thing with the Sonys is they're very, very sleek. It's minimalistic. It's just black plastic. This one feels a little heavier, if I remember right, from the other ones, and a little bit more substantial than I was expecting. It is a textured matte black plastic. Previous ones felt kind of hollow, cheap black plastic. This one feels like it's a step up, which is a good thing. So our last look under the hood, let's go ahead and put the platter on. It just drops down on. Actually, you know what? Before we do that, I want to have a look around the outside and the underside of this so the platter doesn't fall off. So around the front here, we do have a start, stop, up and down. We'll look at that a little closer later. The design of the body, the cabinet, is tapered on all sides with a little surprise on the other side. Let's go around back here. On the back, zoom in a little bit here so we can see clearer. We have, interesting that we have a gain selector switch. So there's a low, medium, high output. That's really interesting. So possibly you could use this gain selector switch to drive a different type of cartridge. Like let's say it had a moving coil cartridge, but that can't be the case. Stay tuned for why that's not the case. But that being said, it does have a gain select switch and an output select switch for the preamp. So you can turn the preamp on and off. For testing purposes for today, we'll use the built-in preamp. Now, this may really, really surprise you, but as it turns out, there are different line levels. Even though there is a set value for what line level is, some devices output a little hotter than others. So this gives you a little bit of control over that. We've also got a USB connection so you can rip your vinyl. And in this case, in a quality way, because usually you find USB capabilities on ceramic turntables that wouldn't, make a lot of sense for transferring vinyl to digital. But this, having a moving magnet cartridge, as we'll look at in a minute, would give you, presumably, we'll see how it tests out, good quality sound and through USB able to back that up digitally. 12-volt power receptacle and an on standby switch. Not on off, but on standby. So we'll see how that behaves. And there's a look at the receptacle for that clip. And that's it for the back panel. Now this one's a little hard to see, but on this side of the turntable, there's a little space there. You guessed it, put your 45 adapter there. That's smart. That's really cool. It doesn't have the peg on top, which I would have complained about if I didn't have this. Now, somebody mentioned on a previous video that, well, maybe they'd leave it off the top for aesthetic reasons. Fair enough. And in this case, they make up for it by providing a place for it. Or for your Record-ology one, totally compatible with the Record-ology 45 adapter as well. This angle also allows us to see the texture on this black plastic. So I don't want any BPC comments. I'm not in the BPC club because, or I should say the antagonist BPC club, because I like black plastic electronics. That's my era. In the 90s, that's the kind of stuff we wanted, was black plastic electronics. Alrighty, looking on the bottom now, we've got 4 rubberized feet that do have a pivot. It's a good tacky rubber with little nubs here. They're not adjustable in height, but I don't think you'll have any trouble finding a flat surface with them. There's also speed adjustments down here, 33 and 45, 2 trim pots. And I don't know if it's showing up, but this thing is already collecting fingerprints on the bottom side. It doesn't have the same texture that the sides and top has. It is textured. It's not completely smooth, but it's not quite as fingerprint resistant as the rest of the unit is. All right, let's go ahead and put the platter on. Like I said, it just lowers into place like that. There's no clip to hold this on, so once it is on, if you tilt it, or flip it over, it's going to fall off. So be very mindful of that. Now we're going to place the stylus. They give you this little ribbon, but in this case, it's not really a ribbon. It's like a plastic strip, which is totally fine. You use it to position the belt over the pulley. And I always recommend moving it forward and back a little bit just to make sure that that belt is laying flat, because if that belt is twisted, it's going to impact the speed consistency. Platter mat on, this strange spandex spongy material, but it's a good look. The black on black, the little bit of the aluminum platter showing through. The platter is like semi-recessed, so it's a pretty low profile. I like that a lot. All right, next let's go ahead and put our clips on the back for the dust cover. Easy as that. You have to admit, that does look sharp. That looks very, very sharp. It's very contemporary to me. I mean, maybe think 90s contemporary, because I'm just sort of stuck in the 90s in a lot of ways. But yeah, that looks cool. That's it set up. We do have to unwrap the tone arm a little bit, but that's a good excuse for us to get in close and look at a little bit more of this stuff in detail. All right, let's start with this unusual gimbal. I've never seen one even remotely like this. It's a very modernistic look to it. Like the LP70 though, it doesn't have an obvious counterbalance. I was corrected in my assumption that that meant that the balance was metal inserted into the tube. This is an aluminum tube tone arm. But actually, this may indicate the presence of a spring, as was the case with the Audio-Technica, which is fine. I can't see an obvious spring, but it's probably likely that this is a spring-loaded one. Let's take a look at this gimbal. It does move a little bit in place there. You always want those as solid as possible, but it does have a little lateral movement to it. Going up here, we do have a bread tie and some protective material on the tone arm itself. Let's go ahead and take this out and remove said plastic wrap, foam wrap, and there's the rest. It just sits right on top. As is common for many automatics, there is no clip. So be mindful when you're carrying this thing around or tilting it that this doesn't fall out of the rest. But like I said, this is an aluminum tone arm, technically a J-shaped tone arm. Once you get down to this piece right here, this is plastic. So it's aluminum up until here and then plastic here with a little plastic lift shelf. And can anybody guess what cartridge we have down there? If you guessed the Audio-Technica 3600, you would be correct. It is not branded as such, but that's a 3600. It is permanently fixed to the tone arm. That means that you can upgrade the stylus, you can replace the stylus, but you can't change the cart. You are, I hate to say stuck, but you are committed to the 3600 from Audio-Technica. That is a good cartridge though. Interesting that the stylus housing on this is black instead of the typical white, and there's no branding on it. Sort of hard to see, but it does have the carbon fiber cantilever, and that is indeed a good cartridge and stylus to have. They have actually branded it with a Sony part number, which is fine. Definitely not the first company to do so. Okay, let's look at some controls here. So up on top, we've got the side selector switch and the speed switch. Curious what this is like. Okay, so it's sort of a mechanical clunk. Similar to the tabbed switches on other units. Feels substantial. And here, this is more of a micro switch feel. That's not quite as chunky and heavy. Little switch down here in the lower left is just a micro switch. That's for pairing the Bluetooth. This sends Bluetooth out. So if you have Bluetooth speakers or Bluetooth headphones, you can listen to your records through those devices. And then down here, we've got the familiar start, stop, and up down switch. So these are usually they're push rods that actually connect to the back of the turntable, but these have a nice long ka-chunk throw on them. And to cue the turntable's stylus tone arm, you use this cueing switch right here, which I like that. That's instead of a cueing lever. You'll notice there's no cueing lever back here because it's performed right up front. I like that. I think that that's really, really nice. Okay, let's get it connected and we'll test out the basic functionality as well as the stylus downforce, tracking force, and the speed consistency and accuracy. All right, let's start with the tracking force. This should be somewhere between 2.5 and 4 grams. Gonna place our stylus right there. Make sure the lift shelf is out of the way. Thank you, Mr. Motorcycle, for screaming down the street. 3.3, so yeah, that's right in range. That's pretty mid-range for this cartridge. This cartridge does track heavier than the VM95 series on the LP70 that I can't stop talking about, but that's another feature of that turntable over the LP60, which uses the same cartridge as this, so that will track lighter. That being said, no damage is going to occur. This thing is designed to function like this, so that is spec'd out perfectly. Okay, this is a strobe warning. Let's check the speed accuracy. Okay, for 33, we'll be looking right here, and for 45, we'll be looking right there. We're going to start with 33. The lines are marching a little bit to the left. That indicates that it's a hair fast, which is preferable, but this thing is very, very close in speed to being perfect. Looking at the middle row now for 45, we're going to see likely the same thing. This one is pretty dang perfect. 45 is dialed in almost perfectly. Maybe a hair of a hair of a hair, a little bit slow. As you can see, those lines are sort of creeping a little bit ever so slowly to the right, but not overly difficult to adjust as we saw on the bottom. Okay, let's go ahead and test the AntiSkate. Boy, if you want to start a disagreement among record people, try to tell them how AntiSkate works. The truth of the matter is you want this stylus, the cartridge, to be writing neutral regardless of, what's happening on the platter. You don't want it pulling in or out or any of that. So that is spinning now. Just to prove it, I'm going to put this adapter right there. And if I drop the needle down on this flat disc, it should remain stationary. So let's see what happens. And it does. Yay, that's what we want it to do. So AntiSkate is set perfectly. Okay, now let's test out the basic functionality of the player. So let's start with a 12-inch record that we have on there now. We've got 12-inch selected up here. I'm going to put this to 33 RPM because it is a 33 RPM record. Then I'm going to hit start. Doing this test is really about making sure that it's dropping at the right position and returning at the right position. We don't want it to drop too early or too late, and the same thing goes for the return. Okay, the start looked good. I'm going to put it into the run out, and this will test the auto return capability. People said in the last video, and they'll say in every video, well, what do you do about a 10-inch record or a 5-inch record or some odd size record that isn't either 7 inches or 12 inches? Well, the answer is you cue it up manually, because this will work as a manual turntable as well. Move the tone arm all the way over. Look at the different direction of the fiber on that platter strobing. That's a strange effect. Okay, it looks like it dropped in the right position, and I'm going to manually cue it up this time to the run out groove. And yep, it does make it to the run out groove. Some players will return too soon on a 45, so that can be adjusted. And as you guys educated me, opening up your record player will not void the warranty. Apparently there's a law that allows us to do that, which is good. I learned so much from you guys, so thank you for that education. Okay, so that basic functionality appears to be just fine. I think next we should test the outbound Bluetooth capabilities. For a Bluetooth speaker today, I'll be using my M90 Mini over here and Fraggle Rock picture disc. Why not? Why not? Okay, so turntable is on right now, but I haven't paired the Bluetooth. So I'm going to start by turning on my Bluetooth device. All right, and then I'm going to press and hold the pairing button over here, flashing. Give it a second to sync up. This can take like 30 seconds. Okay, Bluetooth works fine. It was actually pretty easy to pair. All right, my friends, you know what time it is. It is direct feed sound test time. Let me jump in here real quick. So I think I picked not the best record to test this with. So let's go back to another record that we know sounds really good and give it another sound test.
Mind if I say you're cute?
I don't believe that we've met.
In every way you're cute.
The name I did not get.
Those big blue eyes,
But in your case,
that turned up nose,
a classic face.
that cool and carefree pose.
I may regret this, yes.
I mean, I like your style.
I like the things you say.
That sly, intriguing smile.
You're most
Okay, final thoughts. No big surprise. It sounded fine. It sounds good. It's a great sounding turntable. It's, the build quality is good. It's not like, oh my gosh, this is incredible, but it's definitely not a cheap feeling turntable either. That being said, if it didn't say Sony on it, I would never guess this is Sony. It just doesn't feel like a Sony. And if you know what I mean, you probably grew up in the 80s and 90s, and you're just used to the robust nature of Sony products. The output, the sound quality is fine. The build quality is okay, but just overall, it just doesn't seem like a Sony. I don't know how else to say that. I mean, it's still a very cool record player. It's essentially the same thing we're getting in the LP70 series with the Audio-Technica moving magnet cartridge, the full automatic capability. In a bigger package, it's wider than the LP60. And but in terms of functionality, if you have the Bluetooth version of the LP60, as I do, you essentially have what this does. So I wouldn't upgrade to this from that unless, you know, that one for whatever reason broke down and you needed to, and you just like the way this looks. There's nothing wrong with this whatsoever. In fact, it's got some unique things. I like the little 45 adapter slot on the side. I think that that's really cool. I like the adjustable preamp, the gain settings, etc., etc. From a styling aesthetic, it's fairly generic, but it gets the job done. What do you guys think? All right, my friends, and that is going to do it. Thank you, as always, for watching. Your support, just being here, means the world to us. God bless you. Have a wonderful day. Happy record hunting, and we'll see you next time.